The fluorescent lights above the kindergarten gymnasium hummed the way they always did. That low, indifferent buzz that no one noticed until everything else went quiet. And everything went quiet the moment Ivy ran. She didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. A 5-year-old in a yellow dress with crayon stains on her sleeve broke from the crowd and crossed the room with the kind of certainty that stopped adults mid-sentence. She wrapped both arms around the legs of a man she had never met, pressed her cheek against his thigh, and looked up at him with dark, wide eyes that held no fear whatsoever. "Daddy," she said, "you finally found us." 50 people heard it. Every single one of them froze. The man she clung to was not a kindergarten father. He was not a teacher or a volunteer or someone's uncle standing too close to the cookie table. He was Damian Moretti. And if you lived in this city long enough, if you read the right news and kept your ear to the ground, you knew what that name meant. You knew what he was capable of. You knew that men like him did not attend school fundraisers. He stood completely still. His jaw was set. His hands, large, scarred at the knuckles, hung at his sides like he had forgotten what to do with them. Across the gymnasium, Serena Vale saw all of it in the space of 2 seconds and felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. If you have ever felt that particular kind of terror, the kind that doesn't scream but spreads cold and fast from your chest into your fingers, then drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Type your city, your country. I want to know how far this story has traveled. And if no one has told you yet, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next in this story is something you will not want to miss. Serena had not spoken to anyone about her past in 6 years. She had not told the woman at the dry cleaner who asked too many questions. She had not told her neighbor Marcus, who brought over soup when Ivy had the flu and who she actually liked. She had not told the school administration anything beyond the bare minimum. A name, a phone number, a local address that she checked every morning to make sure was still safe. Her actual name was not Serena Vale, but she had worn it long enough that it felt like hers. Her daughter's name was real. Ivy was the one thing in her life she had never tried to disguise. She worked at a florist 3 mornings a week and did bookkeeping for 2 small businesses on the other days. She drove a 9-year-old Subaru with a cracked rear bumper she kept meaning to fix. She bought groceries on Sunday and packed Ivy's lunch in the same order every morning: sandwich, apple, crackers, the small bag of goldfish that Ivy refused to eat but insisted on having. Her life was not glamorous. It was not even particularly comfortable. But it was hers, and it was stable, and stability was the only currency that had ever meant anything to her. She had built every inch of it on one principle: never be visible. She had done everything right. For 6 years she had done everything right. And then Ivy had seen a man across a gymnasium and run to him. Serena moved before she thought about it. That was the thing about survival instinct. It didn't wait for your brain to catch up. She crossed the room in 8 steps, her hand closing around Ivy's small shoulder, her face tilted away from the man whose shoes were level with her daughter's face. "Ivy." Her voice came out even. She was proud of that. "Come here, baby." Ivy didn't come. Ivy looked up at the man with an expression Serena had never seen on her daughter's face. It was not confusion. It was not excitement. It was recognition. The settled, certain recognition of a child who has been waiting for something and has finally stopped waiting. "She knows you," said one of the other mothers nearby. Her voice was not unkind, but it carried through the silence like a stone dropped in still water. Damian Moretti looked down at Ivy. His expression was controlled in the way that expensive things are controlled, carefully, deliberately, with a great deal of effort behind the surface. He looked at the child, and then he looked at Serena, and something moved through his face that she couldn't name and didn't want to examine. "I don't," he said quietly. He was talking to Serena. "I don't know her." "I know that." Serena finally looked up because there was no other option. Their eyes met and she saw it immediately. The appraisal, the calculation, the particular alertness of a man whose continued existence had depended for decades on reading people faster than they could read him. He was not who she'd been told to fear tonight. She had feared the wrong thing. Ivy, she said again, let's go. This time Ivy released him. Not reluctantly, but just naturally, as though she had done what she came to do and was satisfied. She took her mother's hand without being asked and looked up at the man and said very simply, "Don't be late again." Then she walked back toward the cookie table. Serena followed without looking back. She did not run. Running in front of 50 parents and 2 teachers and the gymnasium monitor would have drawn exactly the kind of attention she had spent 6 years avoiding. She walked. She retrieved Ivy's jacket from the coat hook near the door. She signed out on the parent log, a detail that struck her as absurdly normal. And she pushed through the exit and into the cold night air and did not breathe properly until they were in the car with the doors locked. "Who was that man?" she asked. Her voice was steady. She had made it steady. Ivy buckled her own seatbelt, which she had just learned to do and was extremely proud of. She looked out the window at the school entrance as though she expected someone to follow them out. "Daddy," she said. "Ivy?" Serena turned in her seat. "You've never met that man. I've never met that man." "Why did you say that?" Her daughter turned and looked at her with those eyes that were sometimes so unnervingly direct that it was difficult to remember she was 5. "I don't know," Ivy said. "I just knew." Damien Moretti did not follow them. He stood in the gymnasium for another 4 minutes while the principal made nervous conversation at him and the volunteer coordinator pretended to be very busy with a table of baked goods. He had stopped an attempted shooting outside a restaurant 3 blocks away. One of his own operations. A clean neutralization, nothing that would land on the news, and had followed a blocked street straight into a fundraiser he had no business attending. He had not planned to go inside. He had gone inside because the cold had followed him down the block, and a gymnasium door had been propped open, and he'd wanted a moment that wasn't 30 degrees and smelling like gunfire residue. That was all. He had not expected the child. He stayed in the gymnasium long enough to confirm she was gone. Then he walked outside and stood on the sidewalk and lit a cigarette he didn't want. His phone rang 3 times. He ignored all 3. His driver was parked a block east, and he walked that direction slowly, his hands in his coat pockets, his mind doing something it rarely did. It turned the moment over. A 5-year-old he had never seen in his life had looked at him like she knew him, not like a child who thought she recognized someone. Not a mistake, not a case of mistaken identity. She had run to him with intention. She had called him by a name. She had said, "Don't be late again," as though he had a record of it. He got in the car and sat in the back without speaking for 2 full minutes. "Where to?" his driver asked. "The office," he said. He needed Marcus Wren. Marcus had been his intelligence director for 11 years, and there was very little Marcus could not find out about a person if given enough of a starting point. A yellow dress, dark eyes, the name Ivy, a mother who moved like someone who'd spent a long time practicing invisibility. It was enough. Serena didn't sleep that night. She lay in the narrow bed in the room adjacent to Ivy's and listened to her daughter breathe through the baby monitor she still kept, even though Ivy was 5 and probably didn't need monitoring, and the monitor was more for Serena's own sanity than any practical safety purpose. She ran the numbers in her head the way she always did when she was afraid. Not financial numbers. Though she did that too, it was a coping mechanism she'd developed in her late 20s, but probability. What were the chances that Damien Moretti had been at that fundraiser intentionally? Low. The man operated 3 layers removed from anything as exposed as a public school gymnasium. What were the chances he had followed them? She checked the rearview mirror 6 times on the drive home. No tail she could identify, but she wasn't foolish enough to think she would necessarily see one if he'd sent professionals. What were the chances he was connected to the people she had run from? This was the number she could not calculate, because she didn't know enough about him. She knew his name. She knew the broad outlines of what he was. Organized crime, Italian-American lineage, operations spanning 4 states, untouchable enough that law enforcement treated him like furniture. She knew none of the specifics. The people she had run from 6 years ago were not crime bosses. They were something more clinical than that, more deliberate. The project, she still couldn't think of it as anything other than the project, had been run by people with laboratory access and legal cover and the kind of money that makes institutions obedient. She had stumbled into the edge of it by accident, a low-level administrative assistant who had made the mistake of noticing something she wasn't supposed to notice, and she had run the moment she understood what she'd seen. 3 months later, Ivy. She had spent 6 years believing the coincidence was just that, a coincidence. That the timing of the pregnancy had been biological rather than engineered. That Ivy was hers in the way a child could only be yours, unexplainably, entirely without conditions. But Ivy had looked at Damien Moretti like she was coming home. Serena pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum and breathed. There was a man she could call. Not a friend. She didn't have those, not really. But someone she'd traded information with 3 years ago when a situation had required it. He moved in circles adjacent to organized crime without belonging to any of them. He would know whether Damien Moretti had a reason to be looking for her. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. She called. The man's name was Price, and he called her back in the morning, and what he told her made her sit down on the kitchen floor and not get up for a long time. Moretti had a robbery, Price said without preamble. That was how he always talked, mid-sentence, like he'd already begun the conversation before you answered. Biological. Someone hid a medical archive tied to his name, took samples during a post-surgical window 7 years back. It was quiet, the kind of thing that doesn't get reported because the people who did it were untouchable. What kind of samples? The kind you don't take unless you're running a reproduction protocol. Serena sat down on the floor. You're telling me... I'm not telling you anything. Price's voice was flat. I'm repeating information I came across that I haven't verified and am not responsible for. You can do with it what you want. Price. That's all I have. He hung up. She sat on the kitchen floor until Ivy padded out in her socks and her oversized sleep shirt that had a dinosaur on the front and said, in the direct way that 5-year-olds approached most situations, Mom, why are you on the floor? I dropped something, Serena said. What? Something small. Ivy crouched down and looked at the floor very seriously, scanning for whatever had been dropped. I don't see it, she said. It's okay. Serena stood up and lifted her daughter and held her tighter than the situation required. Do you want eggs or cereal? Eggs, Ivy said, with the cheese on top. Okay. Serena set her daughter down and turned on the burner and cracked 3 eggs into the pan and thought about what she had just learned. She thought about it with the same methodical calm she applied to everything that terrified her, which was the only way she had ever been able to function in the presence of truly terrible information. If Price was right, Ivy had not happened by accident. If Price was right, someone had used Damien Moretti's DNA in an unauthorized fertility protocol without his knowledge. If Price was right, the man her daughter had run to in a gymnasium the night before was not a random dangerous stranger. She watched the eggs set in the pan and said nothing. Behind her, Ivy hummed something tuneless and poured her own orange juice and spilled a little and cleaned it up without being asked, which she'd just started doing and which made Serena want to put her fist through a wall out of sheer helplessness. That afternoon, while Ivy was at school, Serena packed a go bag. She had not unpacked the one she'd had when she arrived in Seattle. She kept it under the bed, updated every year. But this was a second one, smaller, specifically for Ivy. A change of clothes, a stuffed rabbit Ivy slept with every night, a copy of both their documents sealed in a waterproof pouch. She put it in the trunk of the Subaru under a blanket, next to the car jack. Then she went inside and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and thought about whether running again was the right move or whether running again would make whatever was coming find them faster. She was still sitting there when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered it because she had learned years ago that unknown numbers were worse when ignored. Ms. Vale, said the voice on the other end. Male, measured, not Damien Moretti. She didn't know his voice, but something about the register told her this was a subordinate. Mr. Moretti would like to meet. No, she said. He believes it's in... No. She hung up. The phone rang again. She declined it. The third time, she turned it face down on the table and sat in the silence of her kitchen and tried to think. She was still thinking when the school called. The school never called in the middle of the afternoon. There were protocols. There was a specific window for calls. First thing in the morning if a child was ill, end of day for administrative matters, emergencies only between the hours of noon and 3. It was 2:47. "Ms. Vale," said the school secretary, and her voice had the particular quality of someone trying very hard to stay calm. "I need you to come in. Something's happened with Ivy." "Is she hurt?" "She's not. No, she's not hurt, but she's not here." The kitchen tilted. "What do you mean she's not there?" "She was signed out," the secretary said, "by someone on the approved list, but we can't reach the contact we have on file, and, Ms. Vale, we followed protocol. I want to be clear, but the person who signed her out, we're not able to verify." Serena was already out the door. The Subaru started on the first turn. She drove 4 blocks before she realized she had left her coffee on the table and her keys in her hand and had somehow remembered to put on shoes without remembering the act of doing it, and that her hands on the wheel were not shaking because she had trained herself, through years of controlled fear, not to let them. Ivy was gone. She had been in that building 6 hours earlier, eating eggs with cheese on top, humming a tuneless song, cleaning up orange juice without being asked. Now she was gone. Serena pulled over 1 block from the school, put the car in park, and pressed both palms flat on the dashboard. She breathed. She needed to think. She needed to not be a mother for 30 seconds and be the person she had been before she was a mother, the person who had learned, the very hard way, that panic was the most expensive thing you could afford. Ivy was gone. The approved contact list had 3 names on it. Serena, Marcus from next door, who'd been on there since the flu incident, and a third name she had put there 8 months ago as a bureaucratic precaution, a woman named Diane, who worked at the florist and had never once been contacted by the school. She called Diane. Diane hadn't left the flower shop all day. She called Marcus. Marcus was at work across town. She sat in the car outside the school and called the number she'd declined 3 times that morning. It rang once. "Ms. Vale," said the same measured voice. "Where's my daughter?" she said. Not a question, a statement, flat and without texture. A pause. "Mr. Moretti would like you to understand that Ivy is completely safe. Put her on the phone." Another pause. Then a shuffle. Then a small, clear voice that said, with absolute calm, as though she had been placed on the phone by someone she trusted completely, "Hi, Mommy. I'm okay. I'm eating a sandwich. It has pickles. I didn't know I liked pickles, but I do." Serena closed her eyes. "Okay, baby," she said. Her voice came out steady. She would not know until later how she managed it. "I'm coming to get you." "Okay." A pause. "Mommy?" "Yeah?" "He says we can stay for dinner. Can we stay for dinner?" The steadiness cracked, very slightly, somewhere in the back of her throat. "We'll see," she said. The man came back on the line. "An address will be sent to you. Come alone. Mr. Moretti will explain everything." The call ended. Serena sat in the parked car in front of her daughter's school, with the phone in her lap and the trunk full of go-bags, and the knowledge that the thing she had been running from for 6 years had not found her. It had taken her daughter, instead. And now she was going to walk into the most dangerous building in Seattle and sit across from a man she had never met and have a conversation that could go 1,000 different directions, almost none of them good. She turned on the engine. She drove. The address led her to a building she would never have guessed. Not a warehouse, not a back room behind a restaurant, not any of the places a person imagined when they imagined organized crime. It was a converted office tower on the northwest edge of the waterfront district. Glass and steel, a lobby with a security desk, potted plants that looked real and probably were. The kind of building that housed financial consulting firms and mid-tier law offices, and at least one architectural company whose name she'd seen on a billboard. She sat in the car for 3 minutes before going in. She was not carrying anything useful. She had considered the small canister of pepper spray she kept in her glove box and decided against it. Bringing it would insult him, and she needed him not insulted. She had considered leaving her phone recording in her jacket pocket and decided against that too, because if they found it, she would lose whatever small leverage she currently had, which was almost nothing. What she had was this. He needed something from her, or he would not have taken Ivy to get her here, and whatever he needed from her, she was the only one who could provide it. She got out of the car. The lobby guard scanned her without touching her, a wand, professional, brief, and escorted her to an elevator that required a key card she didn't have, but he did. The ride to the 14th floor was quiet enough that she could hear her own pulse. She tracked it the way she'd learned to track it years ago, counting beats, keeping the number below a threshold that meant panic. She was at 68 when the doors opened. The room she walked into was large and mostly dark, except for a bank of monitors along the far wall and a single lamp on a table near the windows. The windows faced the harbor. She could see lights on the water, ferries, cargo ships, the small, brilliant scatter of the city's edge. Damian Moretti was standing at the window with his back to her. Ivy was on a leather couch to the left, cross-legged, working through what appeared to be an actual sandwich. White bread, something green visible at the edges, a glass of milk on the side table. She looked up when Serena walked in and waved with the hand not holding the sandwich. "I saved you half," she said. "Thank you, baby." Serena crossed to her, crouched, put both hands on her daughter's face, and looked at her the way you look at something you thought you'd lost. No marks, no fear in her eyes, color in her cheeks. The rabbit's foot keychain from her backpack was still clipped to her jacket zipper. She straightened, turned. Damian had turned from the window. He looked the same as last night. Same coat, or one like it, dark wool, expensive in a way that wasn't trying to announce itself. He was taller than she'd registered in the gymnasium. The lamp caught the left side of his face and left the right in shadow, which was probably not accidental. "She went willingly," he said. "I want you to know that." "Children go willingly with strangers all the time," Serena said. "That's not a defense." "I know." He didn't apologize for it. "Sit down." "I'll stand." He looked at her for a moment. The same assessment she'd clocked the night before, faster than most people managed it. And then he sat down himself, which surprised her. He took the chair across from the couch and rested his forearms on his knees and did not perform authority the way she had expected him to. "You know who I am," he said. "Yes." "Then you know I don't take meetings to make small talk." He glanced at Ivy, who was eating her sandwich with the focused dedication of a child who has decided that the adult conversation happening around her is not her concern. "I need to ask you something. You're not going to want to answer it. I need you to answer it anyway." "I don't need to do anything," Serena said. "You're in my building. And you took my daughter to get me here, which means you need something from me, which means you're not going to hurt us. So no, I don't need to do anything." Something shifted in his face. Not anger, closer to recalibration. He had expected frightened, and she was not frightened, or at least she was not performing it, and he was adjusting. 6 years ago, he said. "Where were you living?" She didn't answer. "I'm not asking to trace your route," he said. "I'm asking because I think you know something about a project that destroyed a number of people's lives. And I think you've been running from the people who ran it, and I think—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. The next words came out like they cost him something. "I think your daughter is not a coincidence." The room was quiet. From the couch, Ivy made a small sound of satisfaction and reached for her milk. "I want a lawyer," Serena said. "You're not under arrest." "Then I want to leave." "I'll have someone drive you." He didn't move. "But you'll leave not knowing what I know. And what I know is going to find you whether you're in this building or not. The difference is whether you find out from me now, with your daughter eating a sandwich 6 feet away, or from whoever comes next." Serena looked at the window. The harbor lights blurred and sharpened. "Talk," she said. Damian reached into his jacket and placed a photograph on the table between them, printed on plain paper, slightly pixelated. A surveillance capture rather than an intentional photograph. A hallway, fluorescent lit. A door with a keypad. And along the bottom corner, almost incidental, a small framed placard on the wall. She recognized the placard. She had walked past it every morning for 8 months. "You worked there," he said. It was not a question. "Administrative support," she said, because denying it would insult them both. "I processed intake paperwork. I didn't know what I was processing." "Until you did." Until I did. He leaned back. His hand moved to the arm of the chair and rested there, very still. What did you see? Donor codes, she said. On intake forms. A matrix. I thought it was a clinical trial. It read like a clinical trial. Patient identifiers, genetic markers, viability percentages, but the donor codes weren't patients. She kept her voice level. The codes matched names. I found one I recognized, a federal judge, then a senator's staffer, then someone from a short list I'd seen in a background briefing document I was not supposed to have touched. She paused. They were using people's genetic material without consent, high-profile people, and they were producing outcomes. Children, Damien said. I don't know how many. I do. He said it quietly, and the quietness of it was more disturbing than anything else he'd said. 11. We've confirmed 11. Ivy is the only one we can't fully account for because her records were destroyed in the Marchetti fire, and the Marchetti fire was not an accident, Serena said. No, he agreed. It wasn't. Silence. From the couch, Ivy had finished her sandwich and was now lying on her back with her feet against the armrest, staring at the ceiling with the contemplative expression she got when she was processing something. Serena watched her for a moment. You were one of the donors, she said. Damien's hand on the chair arm pressed down, almost imperceptibly. Someone took a blood draw during my post-surgical recovery, 7 years ago. I was unconscious for 4 of the 6 hours they had access to me. A muscle in his jaw moved. I didn't know what was missing. You don't catalog what you have when someone takes something you didn't know could be taken. You think Ivy is... I don't think anything yet, he said sharply. I'm telling you what the evidence suggests. Whether it's confirmed or not is a different conversation. Serena crossed her arms. Her fingers were cold. She pressed them against her own ribs and breathed. And if it's confirmed, then she's in danger from the same people who built this project, because she's not just a child. She's a biometric key. He said it the way doctors say difficult things, without cushioning, because cushioning makes it worse. The project wasn't just about the children. The genetic profiles were encoded into financial architecture, access protocols. The children were designed to be the only living keys to accounts and systems worth... He stopped. How much? She said. Enough that 11 dead children would cost less than losing the accounts. The cold in Serena's fingers spread to her forearms. I've been protecting her, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. I know. For 6 years I've been... I know. His voice was different now. Not softer exactly, but less deployed. You didn't know what you were protecting her from. You just knew she needed protecting. That's... He stopped again, and this time when he stopped it was because he'd run up against something he hadn't prepared a sentence for. She watched his face and saw it. It moved fast, the way things move when they're not supposed to surface, but she saw it. He was terrified. Not of her, not of the situation. He was terrified in the specific structurally different way that a person who has never been responsible for a child suddenly confronts the existence of a child they may be responsible for. Mr. Moretti, she said. Damien. I'm not calling you that. He looked at her with something that was almost a wry expression, except that the situation wouldn't allow it. Fair enough. What do you want from me? Information. What you saw, what you documented, what you still have. I destroyed everything. You didn't destroy everything. She held his gaze. What makes you say that? Because you're still alive, he said. If you destroyed everything, they wouldn't have needed you alive. Someone's been keeping you breathing for 6 years because you still hold something they want. The only question is whether you know what it is. She thought about the USB drive in the false bottom of Ivy's stuffed rabbit, which was currently sitting on the armrest of the couch 6 feet away. She said nothing. The silence went on long enough to tell him something. He didn't press it. That surprised her. Instead, he stood, crossed to a side table, and poured 2 cups of coffee from a carafe that had clearly been waiting there for a while. He brought one to her without asking if she wanted it. She took it because her hands were still cold and because taking it wasn't conceding anything. There's a man in my organization, he said, returning to his chair. His name is Carlo. He's been with me for 19 years. Consigliere. My father's man before he was mine. He turned the coffee cup in his hands. 3 weeks ago, I found an encrypted file on a server that should not have existed. The query strings inside it were searches, names, locations, schools. He looked at Ivy. One of the search strings was Ivy Vale, Seattle, Washington, 2 months old. The coffee cup felt very heavy. He's been looking for her, Serena said. He's been feeding her location to someone outside the organization. To who? That, Damien said, is what I need to find out before they stop waiting and start moving. He met her eyes. They tried to take me out 3 times in the last 8 months. Every time I survived. Every time the operational details suggested inside knowledge. He paused. Carlo has been with me for 19 years. That's not the same as trustworthy. No, he said. It isn't. Something behind his eyes went flat and stayed flat, the way grief goes flat when it's been sitting with a person long enough that the sharp edges have worn down. But it took me until 3 weeks ago to let myself see it. A sound from the couch. Ivy had rolled over and was watching them both with her chin propped on the armrest. Are you arguing? She asked. No, they both said, at the exact same moment, in the exact same flat parental tone. Ivy looked between them. It sounds like arguing, she said. Finish your milk, Serena said. Ivy turned back over and reached for the glass. Damien looked at his daughter for a moment. The words still sat uneasily in Serena's mind, provisional, terrifying. And something crossed his face that she couldn't catalog. She was good at reading faces. She had spent years developing it as a survival skill. But whatever lived in his expression in that moment was something she didn't have a name for. I can protect you, he said. He was looking at Ivy but talking to Serena. You protect people by putting them in buildings with armed guards. Sometimes. My daughter is not going to grow up in a building with armed guards. Your daughter, he said carefully, may not have a choice about what she needs to be protected from. That's not a threat. It's a fact. Serena set her coffee down. I spent 6 years making sure she had choices. I'm not going to stop now because a man in a good coat tells me the world is dangerous. I know the world is dangerous. I built her whole life around that knowledge. You built her life around running, he said. That's not the same thing. It landed. She couldn't pretend it didn't. I'm going to take my daughter home, she said. I know. And you're going to let us go. Yes. And if someone comes for us, they won't tonight. He said it with the particular certainty of a man whose certainty is backed by machinery she couldn't see and didn't fully want to see. I've already repositioned 3 teams in your neighborhood. They don't know you're here, and they don't know why they're there. They think it's a standard surveillance rotation. He picked up his phone, looked at it, put it down. You have tonight. Tomorrow, we need to talk again. You can't make me come back. No, he agreed. I can't. She looked at him for a long moment. His face was tired. That was the thing she hadn't expected. The exhaustion underneath the control, the particular kind of tired that comes from being the person who makes decisions that cost other people their lives, and having done it long enough that the weight of it has become structural, something you carry in your posture and your sleep and the way you hold your coffee cup. She didn't trust him. She didn't need to trust him tonight. Ivy? She turned to her daughter. Get your jacket. Ivy slid off the couch and retrieved her jacket from where she'd apparently placed it very neatly over the far armrest. She put it on and zipped it up and looked at Damien. Thank you for the sandwich, she said. The pickles were good. I'll tell the kitchen, he said. Okay. She went to her mother's side and reached up and took her hand. Then she looked back at Damien. Will you be there tomorrow? He looked at the child for a moment. Where? I don't know, Ivy said. Wherever we go? He held her gaze, a 5-year-old holding eye contact with Damien Moretti, and neither of them looked away first. Yeah, he said finally. I'll be there. Ivy nodded, as though this confirmed something she'd already expected, and turned and walked with her mother toward the elevator. Serena didn't look back. She looked in the rear-view mirror all the way home. She counted traffic lights. She took 3 unnecessary turns and doubled back twice. She logged the car that had followed them from 2 blocks behind the building, a black sedan, maintaining careful distance, switching lanes when she switched lanes, and made note of it not because she intended to do anything about it, but because knowing it was there was better than not knowing. She was being watched. That was fine. She had been watched before. What was different now was that whoever was watching her had company. She put Ivy to bed at 9. Story, then lights, then the nightlight shaped like a moon that they'd had since Ivy was an infant. She sat on the edge of the bed until Ivy's breathing changed to the slow rhythm of sleep, and then she sat there a while longer. Then she went to the living room and took the stuffed rabbit off the shelf where it lived. Not Ivy's sleeping rabbit, the one on the shelf, the spare, and turned it over in her hands, the false bottom in the belly seam. She'd sewn it herself 3 separate times over 6 years, each time updating the contents. The USB drive was the size of her thumbnail. She held it in her palm. What she had on it was not the kind of evidence you turned over to police. It was the kind of evidence that made police nervous, the kind that implicated people several layers above the ones who made arrests. She had sat on it for 6 years because releasing it without infrastructure behind her was the same as dropping a match near gasoline while standing inside the house. She needed someone with infrastructure. The thought arrived fully formed and she immediately resented it. She turned the drive over once, twice, and put it in the pocket of her jeans and went to bed and did not sleep, but that was fine. She was used to not sleeping. At 2:14 in the morning, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't know. It was a single photograph. She opened it and sat up straight. It was a photograph of Carlo. She knew the name now. She had an image attached to it. Standing in a parking structure with a man Serena recognized from the paperwork she had processed 8 years ago. A man who was supposed to be dead, who had been reported dead in the same fire that had destroyed the records. He was very clearly not dead. She stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she typed back, "Who sent this?" The reply came in 40 seconds. Someone who needs you to understand that Moretti doesn't know everything he thinks he knows, and that if you give him that drive, you won't be the one who gets to decide what happens next. She sat with the phone in her hands in the dark of her bedroom and listened to the silence of the building around her and the distant sound of Ivy breathing through the monitor, and understood, with the particular clarity of a person who has just been pushed past the last point where retreat is possible, that she was no longer managing a situation. She was inside one, and the walls had just moved in. She looked at the photograph until her eyes adjusted to the dark and the image stopped blurring at the edges. The man in the parking structure was named Harlan Voss. She knew that because she had typed his name onto an intake form on a Tuesday morning 8 years ago and had not understood what she was typing until 6 weeks later when she found a second file with his name on it attached to a donor matrix that should not have existed. She had noted the discrepancy in her own private log, the one she kept in a notebook, not on any company system. And 3 days after that, the building had a fire alarm drill, and she had taken the notebook home in her bag and never brought it back. Harlan Voss had been the project's operational director. Not the money. The money came from people whose names she'd only ever seen as letter codes, but the logistics, the procurement, the careful, systematic theft of biological material from people who would never know it had been taken. He had died in the Marchetti fire. The report had been specific. Body identified through dental records, closed casket, except he was standing in a parking structure with Carlo Reyes. She typed back, "What do you want?" 3 minutes passed. 4. She watched the screen. "The drive you're carrying, not to take it, to know what's on it before Moretti does." She put the phone face down on the mattress and sat in the dark and thought about the mechanics of the situation. Someone had known she was at Damien's building tonight. Someone had known about the drive. Someone had access to surveillance from the parking structure where Carlo had met Voss and had chosen to send it to her at 2:14 in the morning rather than to Damien, which meant they either couldn't get it to Damien or didn't want to. The first option meant they were outside his organization's reach. The second meant they were inside it. She picked the phone back up. "You knew I was there tonight." The reply was immediate this time. "We've known where you were for 4 years. We let you stay because you weren't moving. The moment you became relevant again, we needed to know what side you'd land on." "Which side is that?" "The side that survives." She turned off the screen and lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling until the light behind the curtains began to change color. At 5:30, she got up, showered, dressed, and made coffee. She stood at the kitchen window while it brewed and watched the street below. The black sedan from last night was gone. Two cars she didn't recognize were parked where it had been. She didn't call Damien, she called Price. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was already awake, which meant something was already happening. "Harlan Voss is alive," she said. A pause. Not surprise. Price didn't do surprise, but something adjacent to it. A pause that meant recalculation. "Where did you get that?" "Someone sent me a photograph. Voss and a man named Carlo Reyes, who is Damien Moretti's consigliere." "When was the photo taken?" "I don't know. Recent. The cars in the background are recent models." Another pause. Longer. "Serena, who sent it to you?" "I don't know." "That's the part you should be worried about." "I know. Someone with access to surveillance of a meeting between Voss and Moretti's inner circle sent you evidence that could blow both of them apart. And they sent it to you specifically. Not to law enforcement, not to a journalist, you." He stopped. "They're not trying to expose anything. They're trying to position you." "I know," she said again. "Where's the drive?" She looked at her jeans pocket on the chair by the door. "Somewhere safe." "It's not safe anywhere," he said. "Not now. Whoever sent that photo knows you have it. Moretti's people know you were in his building. And if Voss has been alive for 6 years, he's had 6 years to rebuild whatever the fire took from him." He paused. "You need to move." "I'm not running again." "Serena, I'm not running." She heard her own voice and the steadiness in it and was faintly surprised. "Ivy has a school reading performance on Thursday. She has a part. She's been practicing the same 4 lines for 2 weeks. I'm not pulling her out of that." Silence on the line. "Then you better figure out who your real enemy is," Price said, "before Thursday." He hung up. "Try it." She called Damien at 6:15. He answered immediately. "No? Hello? No preamble." "I was going to call you in an hour." "Harlan Voss is alive," she said. 3 seconds of silence that felt structural. "Where are you?" he said. "My apartment. Don't send anyone. I'm coming to you. Give me an hour." "Serena." She registered the name in his voice. The first time he'd used it, unguarded, without the formal distance he'd maintained last night. She filed it and moved past it. "1 hour," she said, and ended the call. She woke Ivy at 6:30 and told her she had an early meeting and that she'd arranged for Marcus to take her to school. Ivy accepted this with the practical equanimity of a child who has always understood that her mother's schedule sometimes required flexibility. She ate cereal and packed her own bag and kissed Serena's cheek at the door and told Marcus, who arrived at 7 looking like a man who had also not slept enough, that she wanted to listen to the frog song in the car. Serena watched them go from the window. Then she took the USB drive out of her jeans pocket and looked at it for a moment and made a decision she had been circling for 6 years. She made a copy. Her laptop was old and the copy took longer than it should have, but she had a second drive, a backup she'd kept in the same false seam in a different rabbit, and she transferred the contents and formatted the original and put the original in her jacket pocket and the copy in the lining of her boot, sewn into a strip of fabric between the insole and the leather, which she'd stitched there 3 years ago for exactly this kind of contingency. She was not going into that building with only one copy of the only leverage she had. Damien was not alone when she arrived. She had expected that. She had not expected who was with him. The man sitting to Damien's left at the long conference table was perhaps 60, gray at the temples, wearing a suit that had probably cost more than her car. He had the specific stillness of someone who has spent decades being the most dangerous person in any room and has stopped needing to perform it. He looked at her the way a scanner looks at a document, not hostile, purely acquisitive. "This is Eli Marsh," Damien said. "Federal Task Force, retired. He's been working the Dominion Circle case for 11 years, Marsh said. His voice was level. Unofficially for the last 3. Serena stayed near the door. Why is a retired federal officer sitting in a crime boss's conference room at 7 in the morning? Because the crime boss has information the federal government can't legally access, Marsh said, with the particular comfort of a man who has long since made peace with the ambiguity of his own methods. And I have infrastructure he can't legally use. It's a practical arrangement. He knows about Voss, Damien said. Voss staged the fire himself, Marsh said. We suspected it within a year, but couldn't confirm without evidence that would have required warrants we couldn't get without revealing the investigation. He's been operating under 3 different identities in the past 6 years. The most recent one puts him in Seattle. He looked at her steadily. Your city. You've been watching me, Serena said. We've been watching the city. That's not an answer. Marsh folded his hands on the table. We became aware of your existence 18 months ago, not from surveillance, from a pattern analysis of financial movements tied to the Dominion Circle's remaining infrastructure. Someone was quietly keeping a line of credit active, very small, very clean, that traced back to a shell corporation we'd flagged in the original investigation. The credit line was linked to a residential address in Seattle. Your address. The room tilted slightly. I don't have any credit lines, she said. You don't know about this one, Marsh said. Someone has been paying a very small monthly fee, $42, from that shell corporation to a holding account attached to your building's property management company, since before you moved in. She kept her face still. They rented the apartment for me, she said. Not a question. Understanding arriving in pieces, each one worse than the last. Someone placed you in that apartment, Marsh said. Someone who wanted you in a specific location, accessible, stable, and not running. Someone, Damien said, his voice quieter now, inside the Dominion Circle who wanted you close enough to control, but not so close that you'd know you were being controlled. The $42 figure sat in her head like a splinter. 6 years, she said. 6 years, Marsh confirmed. She walked to the table and sat down, because standing suddenly required more structural support than she currently had. She put her hands flat on the table. The wood was cool. She focused on that. My daughter, she said carefully. Was the anchor, Marsh said. He said it gently, which made it worse. They needed you stable. A woman alone with a child settles. She doesn't run. She builds routines. She gets predictable. He paused. Ivy was not an accident, and your placement in Seattle was not an accident. Someone in the Dominion Circle has been managing both of you for 6 years, waiting for the moment when Ivy's biometric value could be activated. Activated, she repeated. The accounts she's keyed to aren't static, Damien said. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the table, his jaw set, his hands closed in front of him. They mature. There's a trigger architecture built into the financial system, a point at which the accounts unlock automatically if a genetic verification is submitted. That window opens. He stopped. When? She said. He looked at her then. In 11 days, he said. 11 days. She counted backward. Ivy's birthday was in 11 days. Whoever had designed the system had built the unlock to Ivy's 6th birthday, which meant whoever had designed it had known from the beginning exactly when Ivy would be born. They had designed her, start to finish, timeline included. Serena pressed her palms harder against the table and breathed. Who, she said. One word. That's what we're trying. Who built the protocol? She was not asking about the financial architecture. Who took the samples? Who decided my daughter was going to be a key? She was looking at Damien because he was the one who had lost something he didn't consent to losing, same as her, and because she needed to see his face when he answered. The architect of the genetic protocol, Marsh said, was a bioscientist named Reeve. He died in the Marchetti fire, Serena said. Yes. Like Voss. Pause. We haven't confirmed Reeve is alive, Marsh said carefully. You haven't confirmed he's dead, she said. The silence was answer enough. She sat in it for a moment. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and placed the USB drive on the table. Damien looked at it. Marsh looked at it. There are intake forms, she said. Donor matrices. An internal communications log that predates the fire by 3 months. And one document I didn't understand when I took it and have spent 6 years trying to understand. She looked at Marsh. It's a distribution map. Coded. I think it lists where the children were placed. Marsh reached for the drive. Wait, Damien said. Both of them looked at him. He was looking at the drive. His face was doing something complicated that he wasn't bothering to conceal, which told her the effort of concealing it had simply exceeded what he currently had available. If that map is on there, he said slowly, and it lists where the children were placed, there are 10 other kids out there who have no idea what they are. 10 families who think they're living normal lives. He looked at Serena. Like you did. She held his gaze. Like I did, she agreed. He nodded once. Marsh took the drive. The next 3 hours were the most information-dense of Serena's life, which was saying something. Marsh had a team, not federal, not officially anything, but clearly organized and clearly funded, who ran the drive in a secured environment off-site. The results came back in segments, each one handed to Marsh on a tablet, which he reviewed and passed to Damien, and occasionally tilted towards Serena when the content was directly relevant to her. The distribution map was real. 12 entries. 11 children placed in 11 separate cities across 5 states, not randomly, but along a specific logistical corridor that Marsh's people identified as matching a network of shell properties linked to Dominion Circle assets. Each family had been managed the same way Serena had been managed. Housing, small subsidies, invisible stability. Ivy's entry was the 12th, but Ivy's entry had a notation the others didn't. Marsh read it twice. He handed the tablet to Damien without commenting. Damien read it. She watched the color change in his face. Not drain, but go flat, the way light goes flat just before weather comes. He passed it to her. The notation read, Subject 12, Primary Genetic Sequence. Full activation requires Subject 12 verification only. Remaining subjects redundant upon primary confirmation. Scheduled redundancy protocol, concurrent with activation window. She read it twice. She looked up. Redundancy protocol, she said. The other 10 children, Marsh said. Once Ivy's verification is submitted, once her DNA is used to unlock the accounts, the Dominion Circle has no further use for them. He didn't soften it. They're witnesses, evidence, loose ends. They'll kill them, Serena said, within the activation window, 11 days. She looked at the tablet. She looked at the notation. She looked at the word redundant applied to 10 children who were eating breakfast somewhere right now and going to school and asking their mothers for eggs with cheese on top. Then we stopped the activation, Damien said. We can't stop it without dismantling the financial architecture, Marsh said. And we can't dismantle the architecture without access. And access requires Ivy's verification, Serena said. Or a countermand sequence, Marsh said, which exists. It was built in as a failsafe by Reeve, but the countermand key was split. 2 halves, one held by the project's operational director, Voss, Damien said, and one held by the project's primary financial backer. Marsh looked at the drive in his hand, whose name we have just confirmed from your intake documents. He said the name. Serena had never heard it before. Damien's chair moved back 2 inches from the table, not dramatically, just those 2 inches. A physical reflex that his body produced before his control caught up with it. His hands had gone very still on the table. His breathing was the same. Only those 2 inches. That's not possible, he said. Damien, that is not possible. His voice was controlled. Rigid. The kind of controlled that is one additional piece of information away from not being controlled at all. The documents are clear, Marsh said quietly. Serena looked between them. Who is it? Neither of them answered immediately. She looked at Damien's face and the 2 inches of distance between him and the table and understood before either of them said it. It's someone you know, she said. Damien picked up his phone. He stared at the screen. He put it back down. Carlo has been with me for 19 years, he said. It was the same sentence he had used last night, in the same tone, but it meant something entirely different now. Last night it had been the beginning of a suspicion. Now it was the confirmation of a devastation. His son was at my father's funeral. His wife has dinner at my house on Christmas. He stopped. He didn't just feed information to Voss, Marsh said. He is co-architect. His name is on the financial charter as a founding backer. He has been inside the Dominion Circle since before the project began. Since before I knew him, Damien said. The room held that for a moment. Serena thought about 19 years. She thought about what it cost a person to maintain a lie for 19 years. To attend the funerals, to eat the dinners, to stand at someone's right hand and counsel them, and watch their back, and all the time carry a different allegiance in your chest like a second heart, beating separately, invisible. She thought about what kind of person could do that. She thought about the $42 monthly payment that had kept her in an apartment for 6 years without her knowledge, and felt the specific humiliation of having believed she was free when she had in fact been curated. "We need Carlo," she said. Both men looked at her. "Not dead," she said. "We need him functional. He holds half the countermand key. Without it, even if we find Voss, we can't stop the activation. We can't protect the other children." Marsh nodded slowly. "And getting to Carlo," she continued, "means getting to him before he knows we have the documents, before he knows Voss has been identified." She looked at Damien. "Can you get him in a room?" Damien picked up his phone again. This time he didn't put it down. "He calls me every morning at 9, he said. "He has called me every morning at 9 for 19 years. He looked at the phone, at the screen, at whatever name was in his contacts under the number he'd answered thousands of times. "I'll tell him I need him here. He'll come." "He can't know about Voss. He can't know about the documents. He won't." "Can you do that?" she asked. "Talk to him like nothing's changed?" Damien looked at her with eyes that were very quiet and very hard and very tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "I've been doing it for 19 years, he said. "I just didn't know it." He made the call. Serena listened to him talk and watched his face and thought that whatever she had expected from this man, calculation, authority, the comfortable cruelty of someone who moves people around like furniture, she had not expected this. The capacity to pick up a phone and speak normally to someone who had stolen from him and lied to him and arranged the theft of his own biological material and the engineering of his daughter's existence, and to do it in a voice that gave nothing away. Carlo said he'd be there by 10. Damien ended the call and set the phone on the table. His hand rested on it for a moment. Then he took his hand away. "Go get your daughter," he said to Serena. "I want her somewhere with more security than Marcus from next door." "She has a reading performance Thursday." He looked at her. "She's going to be there," Serena said. "Whatever happens between now and then, she's going to stand on that stage and read her 4 lines. That is not negotiable." Something moved through his face. She thought it might have been the first thing close to a smile she'd seen from him, except that the situation strangled it before it arrived. 4 lines, he said. She's been practicing for 2 weeks. "Okay." He stood. 4 lines, Thursday. He picked up the tablet and handed it back to Marsh. "Between now and then, we take Carlo apart and find out what else we don't know." "And if he doesn't talk," Marsh said. Damien moved toward the door. He stopped at the threshold and looked back at the room, at Serena, at Marsh, at the drive in Marsh's hand, and his face had settled into something she could only describe as resolved. The resolution of a man who has just lost something he can't get back and has decided that losing it doesn't change what needs to be done. "He'll talk," Damien said. "He knows I know. And men like Carlo, men who've spent their whole lives managing other people's understanding of them, when the management stops working, they collapse." He left the room. Marsh looked at Serena. "You trust him?" he said. She thought about the phone call, the 2 inches of chair, the name of a man who had been a second father and a lifelong betrayal simultaneously. "I trust that his interests and mine are the same right now," she said. "That's not the same thing." "No," she said, "but it's enough." She stood. She picked up her jacket. She felt the copy of the drive in her boot through the insole and said nothing about it. Marsh was watching her with the careful attention of someone who has been doing this long enough to know when a person is holding something back. She held his gaze. "The other children," she said. "All 11. We need names and locations before the activation window. We're working on it." "Work faster," she said, and left. She was in the elevator, descending, when her phone buzzed. The unknown number from last night. One message. Carlo knows you were here last night. He's known since 7 a.m. Whatever you're planning, you have less time than you think. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. She walked out into the morning light and did not run, and did not slow down, and called Damien back before she reached the car because the window that had felt like 11 days had just become something she could no longer measure with any confidence. And the only thing she knew for certain was that somewhere across the city, a man was driving toward a meeting he believed was routine, carrying half the key to her daughter's survival, in whatever cavity of himself he kept the things he had decided mattered most. She called him while she was still moving. "Carlo knows I was there last night," she said the moment Damien picked up. A beat of silence that was too short to be processing and too long to be nothing. "How long have you known?" he said. 30 seconds. Someone's been feeding me information about Carlo since 2 this morning. Same source that sent the Voss photograph. "Who is it?" "I don't know, but they're inside your building, or close enough to it that it makes no difference." She reached her car, unlocked it, got in without stopping. "Carlo is driving to a meeting he thinks is routine. If he already knows I was there, he knows something shifted. He'll come anyway because not coming tells you more than coming does. But he won't come unprepared. I know how he thinks. Then think faster than he does." She heard him breathe, once controlled. "Come back. I need to get Ivy first. Serena, if Carlo knows you were here, he knows where you're going next." She had the car started before he finished the sentence. "I know. Let me send—" "If you send a car, it'll spook him into moving earlier. I'm 12 minutes from the school." She pulled into the street. "Call Marcus. Tell him to take Ivy out the side entrance and walk her to the coffee shop on Delmore, the one with the green awning. Tell him to buy her a hot chocolate and sit by the window and not move until I get there." "You want me to call your neighbor?" "He's a middle school PE teacher. Nobody looks twice at him. That's the point." She ran a yellow light and didn't slow down. 12 minutes. Then I come back and we deal with Carlo together." A pause. "Together. You need me in the room. He's going to look for weakness, and you're not going to be able to give him any. I'm the variable he hasn't fully mapped yet. Use that." She heard him make the call to Marcus on another line while she drove, his voice low and specific in a way that told her he'd put the phone against his chest rather than muting it, which meant he wanted her to hear that he was doing what she asked. She noted this without letting it mean too much. The school was 11 minutes. She made it in 9. Marcus was already at the side entrance with Ivy when she pulled up, which meant Damien's 12-second instruction had moved faster than her driving, which told her something about the kind of infrastructure that responded when Damien Moretti made a phone call. Ivy had her backpack and her jacket zipped, and her expression was the expression of a child who senses that the adults in her life are managing something and has decided to be cooperative about it for now. "Hot chocolate?" she said to Serena. "With Marcus," Serena said. "I'll be there in an hour." "Is it the thing again?" "What thing?" "The thing where you have a meeting you can't tell me about." Serena crouched in front of her daughter on the sidewalk. She put both hands on Ivy's shoulders and looked at her face. The dark eyes, the small, serious mouth, the crayon smudge that was apparently a permanent feature on the left sleeve of every jacket she owned. "Yes," she said. "It's that thing." Ivy studied her. "Are you okay?" "I'm going to be." "That's different from yes." Serena pulled her daughter in and held her for a moment, one hand flat on the back of her head, and breathed. "Go get your hot chocolate," she said. "Extra marshmallows. Tell Marcus I said it's fine." Ivy pulled back and looked at her with those eyes that saw more than 5-year-old eyes were supposed to see, and nodded once, seriously, and took Marcus's hand and walked. Serena watched them go. Then she got back in the car. Carlo arrived at 9:03. Serena watched him on the monitor from the adjacent room, a glass-walled observation space that Marcia's people had set up with recording equipment in the 40 minutes she'd been gone. Carlo walked through the lobby like a man who had walked through that lobby 1,000 times, which he had. He rode the elevator with his hands in his coat pockets. He greeted 2 of Damien's people in the corridor by name and shook one of them by the shoulder in the warm, familiar way of someone who has always known exactly how to inhabit a space. He was perhaps 62, silver-haired, compact, with the kind of face that had probably looked trustworthy at every age it had been. He wore a gray suit that matched his hair. He looked like exactly what he had appeared to be for 19 years. A careful man, a loyal man, the kind of man who showed up. Damien was already in the conference room when Carlo entered. Serena pressed the audio feed in her ear and watched. "You sounded off the phone," Carlo said, sitting down across from Damien. He poured himself coffee from the carafe without being offered it. A man at home. "Didn't sleep?" "No," Damien said. "The situation at the restaurant last night got complicated?" "The restaurant was fine." Carlo drank his coffee, looked at the table, looked at Damien. He had the particular stillness of a man who is waiting for information to arrive rather than providing any of his own. Serena recognized the posture. It was the same posture she used when she didn't want to show her hand. "There's something you want to tell me," Carlo said. "Yes." "So tell me." Damien put his hands flat on the table. He looked at Carlo the way you look at something when you've decided to stop flinching from it. "Harlan Voss is alive." Carlo's coffee cup stopped 2 inches from the table as he set it down. Serena tracked the 2 inches, the same distance Damien's chair had moved that morning. Both of them, bodies registering what the face was trying not to. "That's not possible," Carlo said. "You know it is." A pause. Very short. "Where did you hear this?" "Does it matter?" "Damien." Carlo's voice shifted. Not dramatically, but the layer of warmth in it thinned slightly, like a material under too much pressure beginning to show its actual composition. "If someone is feeding you information about a dead man, they're feeding you something for a reason. You need to consider the source." "I'm considering everything," Damien said, "including a financial charter I've been looking at since 6 this morning." The room went very still. In the observation space, Serena stopped breathing. Carlo set his coffee cup down. His hands rested on the table. His face was doing controlled work, the internal machinery behind it running fast while the surface held. "I don't know what you think you found," he said. "Your name," Damien said, "on a document that predates our arrangement by 2 years, attached to a project I'm going to describe to you now, and you're going to listen to all of it, and then you're going to tell me what's true." He described it. Not all of it. Not Ivy, not the countermand key, not the 11-day window, but enough. The genetic protocol, the donors, the financial architecture hidden behind biometric locks, the Dominion Circle and its membership. He described it evenly, without heat, watching Carlo's face the whole time, with the attention of a man who has spent decades reading the difference between a person who is surprised and a person who is performing surprise. Carlo was not surprised. When Damien finished, the silence sat between them for a long moment. "I want a lawyer," Carlo said. Damien looked at him. "You're not under arrest," he said, with the exact inflection Serena had used the night before, which she recognized from this side of the glass as deliberately borrowed. Carlo looked at the table, at his coffee cup, at his own hands. "How much do you know?" "Enough to have this conversation." "That's not—" "How much do I need to know," Damien said, "before you stop performing and talk to me?" The word performing landed. She saw it in the small tightening around Carlo's eyes, the specific response of a person who has been accurately named. 19 years, Damien said. His voice didn't rise. It went quieter. "I want to understand. Not to punish you. Not yet. I want to understand how a man does this for 19 years. Carlo looked up. His eyes were dry. That was the thing that struck Serena watching through the glass. No grief, no guilt surfacing. Only calculation, even now. "Your father was already in it," Carlo said. "When I came to work for him, he was a founding backer. He brought me in after 2 years because he needed someone he could trust to manage the operational details that couldn't go through official channels." He stopped. "When he died and you took over, I was already too deep to surface." "My father," Damien said. "He didn't know about the genetic component," Carlo said quickly. "That came later. Reeve developed the protocol after the initial funding structure was already in place. By the time your father died, the project had gone somewhere none of the original backers anticipated. But you stayed." "I stayed." "Why?" Carlo looked at him. "Because by then I had seen the financial architecture. I understood what it was going to be worth. And because he stopped. Something moved across his face, the first genuine thing she'd seen from him. Because leaving wasn't an option they would have allowed. Who is they? The circle has a board, 7 members. I know 3 of them. The other 4 I've only ever dealt with through Voss. He paused. Voss runs the operational tier. The board runs the board. No one below them knows who they are. The counterman key, Damien said. Carlo went very still. Serena straightened. You know about the key, Carlo said. Half of it is yours, Damien said. We know that from Reeves' original protocol documents. We need it. If I give you the key, Carlo said slowly, the circle will know within hours. They have monitoring on the financial architecture. Any attempt to input a counterman sequence triggers an alert. Then we input it when we're ready to move, not before. Damien leaned forward. 10 other children are going to be killed in 11 days if that activation window opens. Children who have no idea what they are. I need the key to stop it. Carlo was quiet. Carlo, I heard you. Then give me the key. Carlo looked at his hands again. His jaw moved. Whatever internal accounting he was doing, it took 30 seconds, and at the end of it, his face settled into something that was not quite resignation, but was adjacent to it. He recited 12 characters. Alphanumeric. No hesitation. He had been carrying it for years, apparently, the way people carry things they've long since accepted they'll never be free of. Damien wrote nothing down. Serena, in the observation room, typed it immediately into a secured channel Marsh had set up on the tablet in her hands. Where is Voss now? Damien said. I don't know his current location. He moves. The last contact I had was 3 days ago, a parking structure on the east waterfront. He wanted a status update on... Carlo stopped. On the girl, Damien said. Carlo looked at him. I didn't know about her, not until 4 months ago. Voss told me she existed. He didn't tell me everything. A pause. I didn't ask. You didn't ask, Damien repeated. No. The temperature in the room changed. Serena felt it through the glass. Damien's stillness shifted, not visibly, not in any way a camera would catch, but the quality of it changed. The stillness of a man maintaining control became the stillness of a man deciding whether to maintain it. She is 5 years old, Damien said. Carlo said nothing. Her name is Ivy. She has been going to school 10 minutes from here for 2 years. She has been practicing 4 lines for a reading performance on Thursday. His voice was so quiet, Serena almost lost it through the earpiece. And you didn't ask. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the building. Then Damien stood, and everything accelerated. Marsh had Voss's location 20 minutes later. Not the parking structure. A location Voss had moved to when Carlo's meeting with Damien triggered whatever alert system the circle used to monitor its own members. A converted facility on a private pier 12 miles north of the city. Maritime access on 3 sides. 1 road in, 1 road out. According to Marsh's satellite imaging, there were 8 vehicles on site and thermal signatures suggesting 20 to 30 people inside. Serena looked at the imaging on Marsh's laptop and felt the particular cold clarity that arrives when a situation removes all its remaining ambiguity. He's already moving to the activation, she said. Carlo's meeting triggered a failsafe, Marsh confirmed. If Voss has a protocol for when internal contact is compromised, he just executed it. He's going to attempt to pull the activation forward. He can't do it without Ivy, Damien said. He doesn't know that we know about the redundancy protocol, Marsh said. He still believes the activation requires a physical verification from her, which means... He's going to come for her, Serena said. The room moved. Damien was already on his phone. Serena was already moving toward the door. Marsh was already relaying coordinates to people she couldn't see. The building filled with a particular organized urgency that she associated with people who have rehearsed for exactly this kind of emergency and are now discovering that rehearsal and reality are cousins who barely resemble each other. She called Marcus from the elevator. He picked up on the first ring. In the background, she could hear the specific ambient noise of the coffee shop on Delmore. Milk steaming, a low hum of conversation, a child's voice asking something she couldn't make out. Is she with you? Serena said. Right here, Marcus said. He was using the voice he used when he was trying not to alarm Ivy. We're on our second hot chocolate. She's drawing on the napkins. Stay inside. Do not go to the window. Someone is going to come to you in the next 15 minutes. His name is Levi. He'll say the word Thursday. You go with him. Serena, Marcus, Thursday. That's the word. You hear anything else, any other name, any reason to leave that doesn't include that word, you stay inside and you call me. Okay, he said. His voice had dropped the performance of calm. Okay. She ended the call and stepped out of the elevator into the parking garage beneath the building and found Damien already there, jacket off, a holster visible under his left arm that had presumably been there all morning, and she had simply not looked for it. You're not coming to the pier, he said. I know. He looked at her, briefly surprised. You need me here, she said. If Voss moves someone toward Ivy before you reach the facility, I'm the only one who can intercept without escalating. Your people around her will flag anything that looks operational. I need to be the thing that doesn't look operational. He studied her face. You've done this before, he said. Not accusatory, just reading her. I've run from people who were very good at finding things, she said. At some point you learn the geometry of it. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he handed her a phone. Not hers, a clean one, already loaded with a contact list she didn't recognize. Levi's number is at the top, he said. He's already at the coffee shop. He'll stay on her until this is finished. He paused. If something goes wrong at the pier, nothing's going to go wrong at the pier. If it does, the drive you're carrying in your boot, don't let Marsh have it without me in the room. He's solid, but he's still federal, and federal has a way of absorbing evidence. She looked at him. I heard you put it in your boot in the elevator, he said. The left one. The sole sits differently. She did not respond to that. Go, she said. He went. The next 4 hours were the longest of her life, which was also saying something. She monitored through the clean phone. Levi sent check-ins every 12 minutes, a single word, rotating through a preset list, each one confirming Ivy was present and undisturbed. Marcus sent a photograph at one point. Ivy asleep across 2 chairs in the coffee shop, her jacket rolled under her head, looking exactly as peaceful as a child who has no idea that the world is reorganizing itself around her safety. The pier operation was not clean. It was not supposed to be clean. Damien had not assembled the kind of team that did clean. He had assembled the kind that did fast and thorough, which was a different thing. She got fragments through the channel Marsh had left open for her. Radio traffic, position calls, the particular shorthand of people moving through a building they didn't know with a timeline they couldn't extend. 12 minutes in, contact made, eastern entrance. 17 minutes, second team on the water side. 23 minutes, shots fired, 2 down, neither Damien's. 28 minutes. They found the secondary server room Voss had been using to stage the activation. 3 technicians. The equipment was already running. The activation sequence had been initiated, preloaded, set to execute in 6 hours rather than 11 days. Voss had moved the clock forward by more than 10 days the moment Carlo walked into that conference room. 31 minutes, Voss located. 32 minutes, Voss in custody. She read that last update and sat down on the edge of a desk in the empty office Marsh had given her and put the phone in her lap and breathed for the first time in half an hour. Then the phone buzzed again. Not the clean phone. Her own phone. The unknown number. She answered it before she thought about it. Serena. The voice was not the same as before. This was older, lighter in register, precise in a way that suggested someone who chose every word before deploying it. You've had a very productive morning. Her hand tightened on the phone. Who is this? My name is Reeve, the voice said. She stood up. You're dead, she said. Voss said the same thing about himself for 6 years. A pause. I want to talk about the countermand key. Specifically, I want to talk about the fact that you only have half of it. She crossed to the window. The harbor was gray and still. Far out she could see the shape of the pier facility. Too far for detail, just a structure against the water. The half Carlo gave us, she said. Carlo's half, Reeve confirmed. Which initiates the sequence, but the countermand requires both halves simultaneously. Input one without the other, and the system reads it as a partial override attempt and accelerates the activation. He paused. By approximately 3 hours. She calculated. The activation was already set for 6 hours from now. 3 hours earlier meant 3 hours from now, which was, she checked the time, 1:15 in the afternoon. Ivy's reading performance was at 2. What do you want? She said. Nothing dramatic, Reeves said. I want to be standing next to Voss when the federal indictments are filed. I want to be on the right side of the table when the circle comes down. I have been waiting for 17 years to be on the right side of the table, and I've run out of patience for waiting. He paused. In exchange, I give you the second half of the key. You built the protocol, she said. You designed my daughter. Yes, he said, simply, without the defensive machinery she'd expected. You're asking me to negotiate with the man who... I'm asking you to make a choice that saves 10 children you've never met by 11 days from now, he said. I understand what I'm asking you to give up to do it. I'm asking anyway. The harbor was still. The pier facility sat against the gray water. In the coffee shop on Delmore, Ivy was asleep across 2 chairs with her jacket under her head. Serena pressed the heel of her hand against the window glass and looked at the city and thought about what she was. Not who she had been before Ivy, not the administrative assistant who had noticed the wrong thing. The person she was now, the person 6 years of controlled fear and careful invisibility had built, was someone who made calculations, who ran the geometry, who understood that survival was not a destination but a posture, and that the posture required you sometimes to look straight at the thing you most wanted to destroy and ask it what it needed. Where are you? She said. 15 minutes from your current location. Come in the front entrance, she said. Tell them Serena sent you. They'll take you somewhere to sit, and you'll wait. And when I come to you, you'll give me everything, not just the key, everything, names, locations, the board members you know and the ones you can identify. You will give Marsh everything he needs to dismantle every remaining piece of what you built. Silence. And in exchange, Reeves said, you get to be on the right side of the table, she said. That's all. I'm not promising you immunity. I'm not promising you protection. I'm not promising you anything that isn't mine to give. I'm telling you that you come in now, you cooperate fully, and you give me the second half of that key in the next 20 minutes, and I will personally tell every person in that building that you came in willingly. She paused. That's what you get from me. Take it or don't. A pause. Front entrance, Reeves said. 20 minutes. She called Marsh before she hung up and told him what was coming. She called the clean phone and confirmed Ivy's status. Asleep, still, Marcus watching the door. She called Damien. He picked up, breathing hard, which told her the pier was not fully resolved. Reeve is alive, she said, a sound that might have been a laugh if the context were different. Of course he is. He's coming in. He has the second half of the counterman key. We need both halves input simultaneously or the activation accelerates. She calculated again. We have a window. Tight. How tight? I need you back here in 70 minutes. She heard him moving, the crunch of something underfoot. A door. Wind off the water. Voss isn't fully secured. Leave him to Marsh's people. I need you here. Why you and me? She looked at the harbor, at the pier, at the gray water holding all of it. Because the system is keyed to your biology, she said. The counterman sequence requires a genetic verification to confirm the override is authorized. Reeve built in a failsafe. The override won't execute without a biological match to one of the original donors. She paused. Your DNA unlocks the command. Without you present, even with both key halves, we can't stop it. The line was quiet for 3 seconds. You're telling me, he said, that I am the key. You always were, she said. They just never needed you to know it. A longer pause. Wind. The sound of water somewhere close to where he was standing. 70 minutes, he said. 68 now. He ended the call. Serena stood at the window and watched the harbor and breathed and did not let herself think about what happened if Reeve changed his mind, or if the timing failed, or if the system had another layer neither of them had accounted for yet. She thought about Ivy asleep on 2 chairs. She thought about 4 lines, practiced for 2 weeks. She thought about Thursday and what it meant to have made a promise about Thursday and what she was going to have to do in the next 68 minutes to keep it. And she turned from the window and crossed the room and went downstairs to wait for a dead man to walk through the front door. Reeve was smaller than she expected. She had built an image of him over 6 years the way you build images of people who have damaged your life without ever showing their face. Large somehow, and certain of themselves in the way that people who engineer other people's fates tend to be certain. A man who occupied space with intention. The person who walked through the front entrance of Damien's building at 8 minutes past the estimated 20 was perhaps 5'8", thin in the way of someone who had been thin a long time and had stopped thinking about it. He wore a gray overcoat that had seen weather. He was perhaps 55 with the kind of face that had once been precise and had since gone slack in places from whatever the last 6 years had cost him. He carried nothing. No bag, no briefcase, no phone visible. He looked at her across the lobby and did not perform anything. "You're younger than I thought," he said. "You're smaller," she said. He accepted this. "Where do you want to do this?" "Upstairs. Marsh is waiting." He walked to the elevator without being escorted, and she walked beside him, and neither of them spoke on the way up. She watched his hands. They were still. She watched his face in the elevator's reflective doors. He was looking at nothing in particular, not at his own reflection, not at her, not at the floor numbers. He was looking at the middle distance of a man who has made a decision and is now simply waiting to see what the decision costs. The doors opened. Marsh was in the conference room. 2 of his people stood at the far wall, not armed visibly, but she knew what a stance looks like when a person is carrying. Marsh himself sat at the table with a legal pad and a recorder and the expression of a man who has been doing this long enough that the specific form of the thing in front of him is less interesting than the information it contains. Reeve sat down across from him without being asked. He looked at Marsh for a moment. "I need the second half of the key in the next 40 minutes, Serena said from the doorway. "Everything else can wait until after." Reeve reached into his coat pocket. He produced a folded piece of paper, actual paper, handwritten, and slid it across the table. Not to Marsh. To the center, equidistant, belonging to whoever needed it. Serena crossed the room and picked it up. 12 characters, handwritten in careful block letters. She photographed it and sent it to Damien's clean phone and then looked at Reeve. "Damien Moretti has to be physically present for the override to execute," she said. "His genetic verification is the authorization layer." "I know," Reeve said. "You built it that way." "I built it with a donor verification layer, yes. Moretti was the primary donor. The system recognizes his sequence." He paused. "I want you to understand something. The donor verification layer was not originally designed to require his physical presence. That was added after the project deviated from its original parameters." "Deviated?" she said. "The circle wanted the children to be the keys. That was always the architecture. But they also wanted an override available only to themselves, a way to unlock the system without the children if the children became unavailable." His jaw tightened slightly. "I refused to build an override they controlled exclusively, so I built one that required the donor, the original source, the person who had the most legitimate claim to the material." He looked at the table. "I did not design this to protect them. I designed it to limit what the circle could do without going through the person they had stolen from." The room was quiet. "That doesn't make what you did acceptable," Serena said. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. You designed my daughter. I designed a protocol. The outcome was—" He stopped. "I held a photograph of her once. Voss showed me. To prove the viability." He stopped again. "She looked like a child." "She is a child." "I know that," he said, and his voice was the first entirely unguarded thing she'd heard from him. Not guilt exactly. Something that lives on the far side of guilt, where a person has gone past the point where guilt is a useful emotion and is simply left with the weight of what they did. I have known that for 5 years. That's why I kept the counterman key rather than giving it to Voss. That's why Voss never fully trusted me. Because at some point I stopped being willing to execute the redundancy protocol. "The 10 other children," Marsh said. "Yes. You were willing to stop it." "I've been trying to engineer a way to stop it for 3 years, Reeve said, without Voss knowing, without the circle being able to respond. He looked at Serena. When your photograph went out through Carlo's network, the school fundraiser, Moretti and the girl, I understood that the window was closing. Either the activation happened on schedule and the redundancy executed, or someone moved first. He paused. I chose to move first. By sending me information anonymously for 2 days, she said, I needed you to trust Moretti before I could approach either of you directly. You wouldn't have come to me. He wouldn't have either. I needed you both in the same room with enough information to act. You manipulated us. Yes, he said. I'm good at that. It's what I am. He said it without particular emotion, a statement of fact about himself that he had apparently long since stopped trying to decorate. It doesn't mean the result is wrong. She held his gaze for a moment, then she looked at Marsh. Get his full deposition, she said. Names, dates, financial records, board member identities, everything. I'll be back when Damien arrives. She left the room and went to the window at the end of the corridor and looked out at the harbor and called Levi. Status, she said. She woke up about 20 minutes ago, Levi said. She's been drawing again. She asked Marcus if she could call you. Put her on. A shuffle. Then, Mommy. Hey, baby. She leaned her forehead against the glass. You okay? I'm okay. Marcus let me have a third hot chocolate. Did he? He said you'd probably say that's too many. It probably is. But it was small, Ivy said. The cup was small. It doesn't count if the cup is small. Serena closed her eyes. The glass was cool against her forehead. That's not how that works, she said. I think it might be, Ivy said with the grave confidence of someone presenting a genuinely reasonable legal argument. Mommy, when are you coming? Soon. An hour? Maybe a little more. Is it bad? It's getting better. Okay. A pause. Is he there? Serena knew who she meant. He's on his way. Okay, Ivy said again, with the same settling finality she'd used when Damien had told her he'd be at wherever they were going. The sound of a child crossing something off an internal list. Ivy, I love you. I love you too. A pause. The cup was really small, Mommy. Serena laughed, which surprised her, a short, raw, involuntary sound that she hadn't planned and couldn't have stopped. Go draw something. I'll see you soon. She ended the call and stood at the window until the laugh had fully passed and she was back to the version of herself that functioned. Damien arrived at 53 minutes. He came in through the parking structure looking like a man who had spent the morning at a waterfront facility that had not been designed for comfort. There was a cut above his right eyebrow that had been dealt with by someone who had taped it rather than stitching it, which was effective but not elegant. His coat was gone. His jacket had a tear along the left shoulder seam. He was not limping, but his gait had the careful quality of someone managing something. She met him in the corridor. He looked at her face. Reeve is here. He's been here an hour. He's given Marsh 3 board member names, 2 of which Marsh says he can corroborate against existing evidence within 24 hours. The key. She showed him the photograph on her phone. He looked at it, looked at her, looked at the time. They had 41 minutes before the preloaded activation sequence executed at the pier, regardless of whether Voss was in custody. The sequence ran on a closed system. Marsh's technical people had confirmed that neutralizing Voss had not interrupted it. It ran because it had been set to run, and the only thing that would stop it was the countermand. What do I have to do? He said. There's a biometric reader in the system, Serena said. Reeve is going to walk us through it remotely. The input sequence requires both key halves entered simultaneously and your DNA verification within a 90-second window. DNA how? A reader. It was built into the activation terminal. Reeve says it's at the pier. Marsh's people have the facility secured. They can get us terminal access. She paused. We do it remotely or we drive there. How long to drive? 22 minutes in current traffic. With your driver, probably 15. He was already moving toward the elevator. Bob, the pier facility smelled like salt water and burned insulation. Marsh's people had secured it in the way that facilities get secured when the securing happens fast and without much concern for furniture. Doors off hinges, equipment overturned in rooms where the entry had been contested. The main corridor was lit by work lights someone had strung after the building's power had partially failed. Cables ran along the baseboard. Somewhere above them, something structural was dripping. The server room was on the sublevel. Reeve guided them by phone, his voice flat and specific and without decoration. Left at the junction, down the stairs, third door. He described his own facility the way a person describes a place they built, and have since decided they are not proud of. The terminal was still running. A matte black unit, roughly the size of a large safe, mounted to the wall. A screen displaying a countdown that currently read 31 minutes and 40 seconds. A biometric reader panel to the right, a flat glass surface, slightly recessed, with a small indicator light burning red. Two key input fields on the screen, labeled primary and secondary. Damien looked at the terminal. Serena looked at Damien. "Together," she said. "When I say." She had the two key sequences in her phone. She pulled them up. One screen, typed side by side, Carlo's half and Reeve's half in sequence. She had written them out on the back of the paper Reeve had given her, double-checking the characters twice in the car. She handed Damien the paper. He looked at the sequences. "Primary is Carlo's," she said. "Secondary is Reeve's. You type primary, I type secondary at the same time. Then you put your hand on the reader." 90-second window, he said. "Once you lift your hand off the keyboard, the window starts. Don't lift until I say both are entered." He looked at her. The work light in the room was the color of sodium, and it made everyone look like versions of themselves seen through dirty glass. The cut above his eyebrow was starting to bleed again through the tape, slowly, and he either didn't know or had decided not to address it. "If it doesn't work," he said, "it'll work. If it doesn't, then we figure out the next thing," she said. "That's what we do. We figure out the next thing." She held his gaze. "But it's gonna work." He looked at the terminal. He nodded once, the way people nod when they're committing to something they can't take back. They typed. She watched her own fingers on the secondary input and felt the strange dissociation of high-stakes focus, the way time slows and flattens and the body operates with a precision that the mind couldn't plan for, each character, each confirmation. She reached the last one and looked at Damien and said, "Ready," and he said, "Ready," and she said, "Now," and they both hit confirm at the same moment. The screen changed. Dual key accepted, awaiting biological verification, window, 90 seconds. Damien put his right hand flat on the reader panel. The light shifted from red to amber, a quiet mechanical sound from inside the unit, a reader engaging, processing, running his sequence against the architectural requirement. The counter on the screen read 81 seconds when the amber light went out. Her chest tightened. 66 seconds. The light was off. The screen still showed the countdown. The activation sequence was still running. If the verification failed, the light came back on. Green. Biological verification confirmed. Countermand executing. The countdown stopped at 58 seconds. The screen went blank. Then it displayed a single line of text. Activation sequence terminated. All linked nodes receiving override. The indicator light turned white and stayed there. Damien took his hand off the reader. In the room, which was lit by work lights and smelled like salt water and burned wiring, neither of them said anything for a moment. The dripping from above continued. Somewhere in the facility, a door banged in a draft. He turned from the terminal and leaned his back against the wall beside it and looked at the ceiling. The cut above his eyebrow was bleeding in a thin line down his temple, and he finally reached up and pressed the back of his hand against it. "It's bleeding," she said. "I know." She found a folded piece of cloth in her jacket pocket. An old habit. She kept one, she couldn't have explained why, and handed it to him. He pressed it against the cut. "The other children," he said. "Marsh has their locations. The distribution map from the drive, cross-referenced with what Reeve's been giving him. His people are making contact with 11 families in the next 12 hours. Carefully." She looked at the blank terminal screen. "They don't know what their children are. It's going to be hard," he said. "Yes." "Do the children get told?" She thought about that for a moment. About Ivy asleep on 2 chairs in a coffee shop. About the 4 lines she'd been practicing for 2 weeks. about the particular shape of a child who goes through the world with a settled certainty that the people around her will show up. Not today, she said. Not for a long time, if there's any other option. He lowered the cloth from his eyebrow and looked at it and refolded it to a clean edge and pressed it back. Carlo, he said, is in federal custody. Marsh moved him while we were driving here. He'll cooperate. He already is. He's been talking since the conference room. Men like Carlo collapse, he said. You said that this morning. It was true this morning. She looked at him. The sodium light, the wall behind him, the cloth pressed to his temple. He looked tired in a way that went past the physical. The specific exhaustion of a person who has just severed something that has been weight-bearing in their life for a very long time and is now experiencing what it feels like to stand without it. Your father, she said. He was quiet. I'm sorry, she said. Not because she'd done anything, because some things require the words regardless of who did what. He looked at the floor. He was dead before I could ask him anything. He'll stay that way. A pause. What he was doesn't change what he was to me. I've had 4 hours to decide if that's something I can carry, and it is. It's just heavy. Yes, I don't need you to tell me it gets lighter. I wasn't going to, she said. He looked at her. It doesn't get lighter, she said. You just get stronger under it. That's not the same thing, and anyone who tells you it is simplifying to make themselves more comfortable. He held her gaze for a long moment. Something in his face settled. Not peace, nothing as resolved as that, but an acknowledgement. A person recognizing that the thing in front of them is not going to lie to make them feel better, and finding that more useful than comfort would have been. We should go, he said. Yes. They left the terminal room and walked back through the facility and out into the afternoon, which was cold and gray and smelled like the harbor, and the light was the low-contrast light of a Seattle afternoon that has decided not to commit to either sun or rain and is simply existing in between, and Serena looked at it and felt the particular texture of a thing that has been wound very tight, beginning, very slowly, to unwind. She got to the coffee shop at 1:10. Ivy was awake and had covered 4 napkins in drawings. Marcus looked like a man who had been managing a 5-year-old on 3 hot chocolates for several hours and was professionally equipped for it, but personally grateful for relief. Levi, who she had not met in person until now, was a compact, quiet man in his 30s who nodded at her from near the door and left without ceremony the moment she walked in. Ivy looked up from her napkins and gave her mother the specific look of a child taking inventory. You have a thing on your jacket, she said. Serena looked down. A smear of something, oil possibly, from the pier facility. I'll wash it. Your face looks tired. I am tired. But okay, tired or bad tired? Serena sat down in the chair across from her daughter and looked at her. The 4 napkins, the crayon in her hand, the 3rd empty hot chocolate cup, the dinosaur shirt visible under the jacket collar. Okay, tired, she said. Ivy nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. Marcus leaned over and said quietly, I don't know what happened today, and I don't need to know. But I want you to know that I am never doing this again without a clear set of instructions. I know, she said. Thank you. She's fine, he said. She was fine the whole time. She's a tough kid. She is. He gathered his coat and left, pausing at the door to look back at them once with the expression of a man who has concluded that his neighbors are more complicated than he originally assessed and has decided this is probably fine. Serena picked up one of Ivy's napkins. It was a drawing of 3 people, stick figures in the rough style of early childhood art, except that Ivy had been drawing since she could hold a crayon, and her stick figures had more detail than most. Hair, specific features, colors. The figure on the left was small and yellow-dressed. The figure on the right was tall with dark hair. The figure in the middle was slightly shorter than the right one and had a jacket. Who is this? Serena asked, pointing to the tall figure. You know, Ivy said, without looking up from the napkin she was currently working on. I want to hear you say it. Ivy looked up. Daddy. Serena looked at the drawing. The three figures arranged the way families arrange themselves in children's drawings, close, facing forward, occupying the same space without explanation. "Ivy," she said carefully, "how did you know? That first night, how did you know who he was?" Ivy looked at her with the expression she reserved for questions she found genuinely puzzling. Not because the questions were hard, but because the answers seemed so obvious to her that the question itself was confusing. "I just knew," she said, "like how I know you're you. I didn't have to think about it." She went back to her drawing. "Is he coming?" "Later tonight, maybe. Tomorrow for sure." "Okay." A pause. "He said he'd be there Thursday." "I know." "He keeps his promises?" Serena looked at the drawing, at the three figures, at the particular confidence with which a 5-year-old hand had placed them in relation to each other. "I think he's learning to," she said. Thursday came gray and cold, which was Seattle being itself. The elementary school gymnasium smelled like floor wax and the particular brand of organized chaos that comes from 30 small children in their best clothes being asked to stand in specific places and not touch each other. Parents filled the folding chairs in 3 uneven rows. A teacher was doing final position checks with the intensity of someone staging a production that mattered enormously, which it did, to everyone in the building between the ages of 5 and 7. Serena arrived early and took a seat in the second row. Damien arrived 4 minutes before the performance began and sat in the empty chair beside her without comment, which she had left empty without commenting on it either. He had a fresh cut above the eyebrow, the tape gone, replaced by 2 small strips, and he was wearing a different coat, the same general register, but this one without the morning's damage. He looked like himself, which was to say he looked like a man who occupied space with the specific density of someone who had made a great many decisions and was still standing. He looked at the stage, at the children being arranged. She watched him look. "She's in the back row," Serena said quietly. "Yellow shirt. She'll move to the front for her part." He found her. She watched him find her. The small shift in his body when his eyes settled on Ivy. The way his breathing changed almost imperceptibly. The particular stillness of someone who has just found the thing they didn't know they'd been looking for. He didn't say anything. She didn't ask him to. The lights in the gymnasium shifted. Someone had a spotlight, a small one, positioned on the little stage area, and the children began. They were reading poems, short ones, the kind written specifically for children's performances, easy words and clear rhythms. The first 3 children read well. The 4th forgot his place, and his teacher whispered to him, and he recovered. The 5th read so quietly that only the first 2 rows could hear. Then Ivy moved to the front. She stood at the small podium, a wooden box that brought her to the right height, and looked at the paper in front of her and then, characteristically, put the paper down and looked at the audience instead. She found her mother first. Then she found the person beside her mother and looked at him for a moment with the directness she applied to most situations, checking something, confirming something, and then she looked at the room the way a child looks at a room when they've decided to proceed. She said her 4 lines. Serena had heard them 14 times in 2 weeks and could have recited them in her sleep, but hearing them now in the gymnasium with the spotlight and the smell of floor wax and the rows of parents and the person sitting beside her breathing quietly, it was different from what she had expected. Ivy's voice was steady and clear, and she didn't rush, and she didn't look at the paper, and at the end she stepped back without drama and took her place in the back row again. The room applauded. Damien did not applaud loudly. He didn't perform the enthusiasm of a parent at a school performance. He simply clapped, steadily, the way a person claps when they mean it rather than when they're demonstrating that they mean it. Serena looked at her hands in her lap. She thought about Harlan Voss, who was in federal custody and had spent 12 hours confirming the names of 3 board members before his attorney arrived. She thought about Reeve, who was in a conference room somewhere being debriefed by people with legal pads and recorders, and the particular patience of people who understand that complete information takes time. She thought about Carlo, who had collapsed exactly as Damien had predicted, systematically and thoroughly, with the efficiency of a man who has spent 19 years managing information and applies that same efficiency to the act of releasing it. She thought about 11 families in 11 cities who had received phone calls in the last 48 hours that had changed the way they understood their children's existence and who were now navigating that knowledge in the particular privacy of their own lives, without ceremony, without Serena present to witness it. She thought about the drive in her boot, still there, because some habits of survival take time to lay down. She thought about $42 a month for 6 years, and the apartment she had believed she had chosen, and the freedom she had believed she had built, and the fact that the belief had been wrong, but the 6 years had been hers regardless. Hers and Ivy's, earned in the specific way that chosen things are earned, which is to say, through the daily labor of showing up. The performance ended. The children were released into the audience in the particular contained chaos of small people reuniting with their adults. Ivy came through the crowd at a pace that was not quite running because running indoors was a rule, but testing the precise structural limit of that rule, and she reached Serena first and accepted the hug with the patience of a child who has learned that her mother needs a certain amount of physical confirmation that she is present and intact. Then she looked at Damien. He was crouched. He had moved from his chair to crouching, which brought him level with her, and she registered the deliberateness of that. The specific physical concession of making yourself smaller so that someone else doesn't have to look up. "You came," Ivy said. "I said I would." She looked at him the way she had looked at him in the gymnasium 9 days ago, with that settled certainty, that absence of uncertainty, the recognition that had no rational explanation and required none. "Did you hear my lines?" she said. "All 4 of them." "Which one was your favorite?" He thought about it. He did not answer immediately, which she noticed and seemed to find appropriate. "The last one," he said. "That's my favorite too," she said, "because it's the one where you find out everything works out." She reached out and took his hand, the way she'd taken her mother's hand in the coffee shop the week before, and turned and started walking in the direction of the gymnasium exit, as though the 3 of them were simply going somewhere, and the direction was obvious, and the arrangement was settled. Damien looked at Serena over Ivy's head. She looked back at him. There was no clean way to name what she saw in his face, and she didn't try. It was not happiness. Happiness was too simple for the weight of everything that had been spent to arrive at this particular moment in a school gymnasium in Seattle on a gray Thursday afternoon. It was something more structural than happiness. The expression of a man who has just discovered that a thing he did not believe he deserved had come to him anyway, and he was in the process of deciding what to do with that, carefully, with the awareness that it could still be broken. She understood that. She had been in the process of deciding the same thing for 9 days. She stood up from her chair. She walked to where Ivy was waiting, their daughter between them in the way she had drawn them on the napkin. Arranged, deliberate, the 3 figures close enough that the space between them was not distance but contact. They walked out of the gymnasium together. The cold air off the street hit them at the door. Ivy registered it and pulled her jacket tighter with her free hand, the one not holding Damien's, and looked up at the gray sky with the equanimity of a child who has been raised in Seattle and understands that the sky is going to be gray and is fine with it. "Can we get food?" she said. "What do you want?" Serena said. "Eggs," Ivy said, "with the cheese on top." Serena felt something release in her chest that she could not have named and did not try to name, something that had been wound tight since a fluorescent-lit gymnasium 9 days ago, and possibly since much longer than that, since the first time she had picked up a go-bag and put Ivy on her hip and started building the careful, invisible architecture of a life that no one could find. "Eggs," she said. They walked down the sidewalk. The city moved around them the way cities move, indifferent, continuous, full of its own noise and its own concerns. Nobody looked at them. 3 people on a sidewalk in Seattle on a Thursday afternoon were not remarkable. That was the thing she had wanted for 6 years and had never fully allowed herself to believe she would have. Not safety, exactly. Not the guaranteed permanence of nothing bad happening. But this, the unremarkable texture of an ordinary afternoon, the cold air and the gray sky, and a child asking for eggs with cheese on top, the ordinary weight of a future that was simply hers to walk into. She didn't look back. She had spent 6 years looking back. The sidewalk went forward, and they went with it, and the city closed behind them like water, and whatever came next would come, with difficulty, with imperfection, with the daily labor of people who are building something real rather than something easy. But it would come to people who were no longer running from it, and Ivy walked between them, holding both their hands, and did not look back either, because she never had. She had always known where she was going.